Welcome to the Big Movement Podcast. If you're ready to create results and make huge strides in your business, finances, personal development, and health, then you're in the right place. Pushing past excuses and powering through procrastination can be a challenge alone. Here, you'll get the support, tools, and knowledge you need to get to the level you desire in your business and life. Let's get started with your host, Byron Ingram.
And welcome to another episode of the Big Movement Podcast. Today, we have a special guest. We have Melanie Downey, who has been building big brands within the public relations for over 20 years, and it's her favorite way to spend time as she does things such as singing slightly off-key ballads to her hairless dog, Penny, who listens to it, but it's all about helping her clients get recognized as leaders and go-to experts with, believe it or not, over 6 billion impressions you get a press under her belt. So we're going to learn how you can leverage PR to grow your business, because if people don't know who you are, it doesn't really matter in the world. So let's give a welcome to Melanie. So Melanie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure, definitely. So how did you get into the world of PR? It's such an evolving industry back from the days when it was just, here's a newspaper, and now there's so many media outlets.
Yeah, well, I started in public relations back in the early 90s. And I started out as a newspaper reporter and realized that I did not like being a newspaper reporter, and thought, how can I kind of translate my skills? And public relations seemed fun, and I was looking for more of an office environment. And I was actually in college at the time. I was a staff reporter at the Hartford Courant, which is their large regional daily. And I started my own PR agency, promoting local brands to the college market in Connecticut. And that's how I got started and interested in it. And from there, I went into high-tech PR, because this was now we're talking 1994, 1995, and internet was starting to be a thing. And I happened to date a lot of computer engineers. So I knew a lot about it. And I was like, you know what? I can talk about this stuff and no one else can. And from there, it's kind of history.
And then sometimes it all comes down to being in the right place at the right time, because it's when you look at how the internet truly began taking off at that time, where I think some people, they take things for granted of how easy it is to use stuff, versus you think back to, the early 90s and that stage when if you were to use Yahoo, since Google wasn't around yet, you could actually count the number of pages on the internet in the thousands.
Yep.
Those are the good old days where it's like, oh, here's your 30 choices for a particular term, not like 5 million pages or something that comes up now.
Yeah, it was great. It was such an awesome time. I feel so bad for people in their 20s just starting out now with the market so saturated, because we just hit it right in the 90s.
Right, but at the same time, you look at the ease of getting things out there. If someone wanted to put a page online back then, it was the old-fashioned way. You had a text editor window, writing everything in raw HTML, and then you had a browser window, like, no, that color's not right. Okay, change the text code. Oh, that image is not right. Okay, let me change its coordinates. And it was a manual process versus drag and drop.
Yeah, it's actually funny because, I worked for startups, and it was always like a couple guys in their parents' garage, or, maybe even 5 people who were doing this in the evenings and trying to grow a company. And I was the PR and marketing person, but we all needed to kind of pitch in. So I actually learned how to do a little bit of programming, because back then it was so manually intensive.
Right.
So we were all doing all that stuff. But
yes,
those little brands, a couple people in the garage, I've worked for so many brands that have gone from that to being bought out by huge brands for millions and millions of dollars. I've worked with probably 6 or 7 companies that have gone on to really successful IPOs. So it's really great to see that progression from let's figure out what we want to do to, all right, who's the best bidder?
Right.
Who's going to buy our stuff?
And that had to be an interesting transformation for them, because you have these guys that are just like, we just want to create something cool. Next thing you know, like, you mean we can make money with this?
Well, everyone went in it with the intention of making money. I will say that.
Right. Well, naturally, I don't think anyone's going to I'm going to create this just for the fun of it. But in terms of the IPOs, where it's, okay, you're making money, but then the scale of it truly hit. It's like, oh wow, it's bigger than what they thought. And you think about how many companies end up being bought out by these larger ones, and it just changes the entire course of their future because of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it goes from just they're doing this because they're making money. It's like, okay, we got to pay rent, so this sounds like a great idea. To next, you're like, okay, what are we buying again?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, once you do that, and once you sell that first company, it becomes sort of like, well, this is your thing now. So pretty much everyone that I've ever worked with has become a serial entrepreneur. So I've seen not only the companies that I've been directly involved with, but all of my colleagues and my friends' companies, just one after another, and you go through the process and sell them or merge with another company and move on. So
right, it's an ongoing process. So obviously, when it comes to PR, it's a challenge for people, especially if they don't know the media industry. What's one of those challenges that you see that people start with going, we have this great idea, so now what do we do?
Yeah, probably the most important rule to public relations is to know what's in it for your audience. And that's kind of the golden rule of PR as far as I'm concerned. And it's kind of my guiding mantra. And now that I'm teaching people how to do their own public relations and get their own publicity, it's the first thing that I tell people is you need to know and you need to be able to express what's in it for them. And that's for, the people who are interested in your product, who's going to be buying it, but also reporters and influencers and anyone else that you want to listen and eventually share your message.
Right. Oh, naturally. You have to do that because too many people forget about that simple principle. If you can't explain what's in it for them, they're like, whatever, and they just go on to the next thing.
Yeah. And especially going back to what you said before, how much it's changed over the past, 20 or 30 years. It used to be there was a limited amount of traditional press, the newspapers, magazines, TV, and maybe there were one or two media outlets that you could pitch to. But nowadays it's just exploded, and that's both good and bad because there's really no shortage of opportunities for anyone who wants to do their own PR. It is so much easier now than it was back then. And there's just, as long as you know how to talk about your brand and how to talk about your messages, it can help you rise above all that clutter, because even though it's easier, you do have to stand out a bit more. It's a little more difficult to stand out than it was, a couple decades ago.
Right. Oh, definitely. It's that conundrum that we're experiencing, because you think about in the past, it's like you said, if there's only a couple outlets, sure, you had to work harder to get into them, but then you were noticed pretty much right away because there wasn't a lot out there. Mm-hmm. Versus now there's so much noise, and it's like, okay, great, you have to stand out in this crowded audience versus you're standing out in a gaggle of people. Mm-hmm. So it changes the strategy probably quite a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, some similarities, some things are different. But the one thing that really kind of stands out is that you just need to rise above the clutter because there's so much of it.
So what do you mean by clutter? Because you hear people saying, oh yeah, I submit press releases all the time. Is that what you're referring to? Just people just throwing stuff out there to see what sticks?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of points there. The first is that it's just so much easier to do all of this than it was. You can really, especially as a small business owner, you can do your publicity for free. You can not have to put any extra money into your PR efforts. Versus before, the only way that you were going to get your message out there was if you put your press releases on the wire and you did big mailings that cost thousands of dollars. So it used to be cost prohibitive. Now anyone can do it. With that, of course, it means that everyone's doing it. And even if you have, well, so I talk a lot to reporters, and they are pretty much telling me that in any given day, 60 to 90% of press releases or pitches that they receive are unusable, and they just instantly delete them. But even in, if they get, say 100 really good pitches in a day, you need to be that person who knows how to angle your story and position your story so that the reporter is going to say, that's good news, and I want to cover that now.
That's good to know because I've seen things from that marketing perspective of people who they create stuff to spam press releases. I'm thinking, why would you do that? Because you're attaching your name to something that people are just hitting the delete button on, and that's the last thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Like I said before, going into anything, whether you're pitching a reporter or writing a press release or even writing a blog post or doing your social media, you really need to be able to answer that question, what's in it for them?
Right, naturally. So you mentioned people can do it for themselves, and it might sound like it's this overwhelming thing, like, oh my gosh, you mean I can approach the media? What's really involved with that? Because it takes away that mystique or that misinformation that it's hard or difficult.
Yeah, it's actually really quite simple. First, to start off, you need to know what your brand messages are, and you need to know exactly what you want people to know about yourself or your brand. Then the next step is to figure out what media outlets you want to pitch, and that I teach a whole big long thing about how to determine which media outlets are going to get you the best return on your time investment. And that goes, you start off with market research on your audience, which sounds a lot more difficult than it actually is to do. And everyone says, when they've gone through my course, they always say, I never knew that was so easy or so helpful. And then it is determining what topics are right for that audience and are in line with your brand messages, determining which angle you want, and then it's just a matter of getting that information out to reporters. And the easiest way to do that is just to email them a very brief pitch.
Okay, now what do you mean by emailing them a brief pitch?
Okay, so well, we talked about press releases, and I don't know how familiar everyone listening is going to be with press releases, but press releases are sort of a quick snapshot of a story that you put together. You will see a lot of them on the internet that might be about a product launch or a new partnership or a new customer win or something like that. A pitch is sort of a customized email that you send to a reporter that gives them the why that's important or why now or the what's in it for their audience. So with a pitch, you're really talking about anywhere from 3 to 5 sentences. It's short and quick and to the point, giving them nothing except what they need to know in order to know whether they want to write a story about you or interview you on television or on the radio.
And I think that's something that's valuable to understand, because when you think of the masses and some of these courses that people are being taught out there, it's like, oh, just submit press releases all the time, but that's not necessarily going to get anywhere. But it sounds like if you take the time to identify the specific reporters, it changes everything.
Yeah. And, it has a lot to do with really thinking and planning about how you want your brand to develop and grow. So in the past, and, this is over the past, over 20 years, it seems like it maybe wasn't that much time, but I guess it's been that much time. When we're working on developing new products or coming up with a new brand or even a new service provider, we always start with, how are we going to market this? So before you even start working on those, phone apps or software programs or, a product that you're going to sell, you always need to be thinking, how are we going to market this? And so any good business plan will start with a brand foundation. And then it just makes all of those decisions that you make about your business that much easier. And just to give a quick example, I have a student in my publicity workshop right now. She is a book author, and she is also a literacy specialist for boys ages 9 to 14. And she's written some books, and she does speaking and workshops, and she does really well. She has a great system for getting boys interested in reading and getting them to learn to love reading. And she joined my publicity workshop because she was ready to take her business to the next level. And as part of the workshop, we did a one-on-one where we discussed her brand and its messages and how to convey them best through the media. And as a result of that conversation, she's completely rewriting her latest book. And she's so excited about it because by going in thinking, here's the book, here's the information that I have in the book, and of course it's nonfiction, but then this is how she's going to market it. And now she has a whole campaign that's going to be ready when she's finished rewriting her book, and she'll be able to launch it with a big bang.
Now that's a great example of how the impact is starting off with the knowing what the outcome is going to be, because I think one of the challenges people experience when they decide to venture into writing a book, they never think about how are they going to market it. So when they get it, it's like, well, this is great, but now what? They haven't thought ahead.
Yeah. And, this actually just occurred to me, but being an author is kind of the same as it is being a marketer, comparing 30 years ago to now. Because before, if you had a book, you had to find a publisher. There weren't millions of books out there. But now that we have Amazon and it's so easy to self-publish, anyone who wants a book can have a book. And while that's great because it sort of levels the playing field and opens that opportunity up to so many people, you really need to be able to market your stuff well in order to rise above all of those other millions of self-published books that are on there.
Oh, definitely. And it's regardless if someone uses a publisher or not, you'll look at today's world. We live in that era that you have to be responsible for your own success, that the publisher these days, sure, you get to tap into their distribution channels, but outside of that, it's really up to you to make it happen. And if you sit around and do nothing, well, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's changed it where there's so many people now, what they're looking at is, why do they want to give up the literary control of their book to a publisher when they can do it themselves and have full control? And still they have to do the marketing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to see how industries are changing because they have to adapt to the new realities because of creative space. If there's no longer this monopoly where like, oh, you want to publish a book? Well, you have to come to one of these companies here. Now, not so much.
But it is exciting, though, because now anyone who has the drive and the ambition can really do whatever they want. All those opportunities are open for everyone.
Oh, definitely. It's a beautiful thing. It's just that people have to know what they're getting into and think about the outcome first, because there's nothing like you see people create this amazing book. Like, this is great. It's my life's work. I put so much into it. And like, so what do you do with it? Like, and there's a big lost look on their face. Like, well, I thought people just would buy it because I wrote it. Like, well, no. Like, it's kind of like people have to be hungry for the information first. If they're not hungry for it, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like offering a steak to a group of vegans. It's not going to go well.
Yeah, a lot goes into becoming an overnight success.
Right. People forget about the overnight success part. That's the tip of it. They forget about, here's the overnight part, and then the months before, the years before, all that leading up to that one moment. Even, back in the late 90s, I worked for Monster.com. And, when I first started working with them, they had a little bit of recognition. But in the first 6 months that I was working for them, they went from
100,000 media impressions a month to over 6 billion. And everyone kept saying, like, oh my God, you guys are everywhere. Like, you just came out of nowhere. And I'd say, no, this was planned and calculated, and the whole business revolved around these PR and marketing campaigns. It didn't just, we weren't suddenly discovered. Like, we worked really hard to get as known as we were, and ended up being one of the top 20 websites in the world.
Wow, that's quite an interesting example of how you can leverage it. So, turning back the clock to then, what were some of those things that you did to go from essentially just a blip on the radar to being everywhere? Because I'm sure some people listening going, how on the insert whatever explicative to do that?
Yeah, the biggest thing that we did, and this still holds true for so many industries today, is I focused the PR campaign around education.
Okay.
People didn't necessarily know about the category of online job boards, or they had no idea what an online job search even was. So a big part of the campaign was just explaining to people what online job search was and how it can change their life.
And you had something there I think is really important. It's the education, because so many times people enter that I just want to sell mentality, not realizing that you have to teach people how they can buy your services.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just changing a mindset. I have one client who owns a acupuncture studio or practice locally to me, and she has a good business, and people who go there love her. But she says everyone comes in and they say, oh, you're such a hidden gem. And she didn't want to be a hidden gem. So we did a brand analysis for her and market research. And what I found was it wasn't that people didn't want to try acupuncture, but they had no idea what to expect. And so we created a whole plan on explaining what was acupuncture, and this is what to expect when you go in for your visit, and this is what it will feel like, and these are results that you can expect. And it was amazing with that little bit of education how everything just took off for her.
And that is, in itself is interesting, because it just shows that people have uncertainty, that once it's met, they're more than willing to try something new and different, especially if they're dealing with something. But it goes back down to educating them properly. So how did you go about that market research? Because some people are like, well, what did you do? Just start like chasing down people in the mall, like, hey, you, how come you haven't tried acupuncture yet?
Yeah, well, there are a few ways that you can go about it. So for her in particular, she had a practice already. So what I did was, first I went and I spoke to some of her best customers, and I went through an interview process with them. And I have specific questions that I ask that get me the information that I need to put brand campaigns together. And then sort of behind the scenes for an untapped market, I did two things. I did a blind survey of people who had never tried acupuncture and just found out, is it something they've heard of? Is it something they're interested in? What's keeping them from trying it? What have they heard others say about it? And then I just did some good old research online. And if you know where to look, there are so many great places to do your market research for free, and it doesn't take much time. And I'll just say one of my favorites is to go on Quora, Quora, for those of you who don't know it. But you can go in there and find out what kind of questions people are asking. So those are real life people looking to solve real life problems that are going on there. And you can just start typing, and all of these answers come up that will tell you, this is what your potential client wants to know about. And then that gives you the opportunity to then create a campaign around it and answer all those questions, and then hopefully bring them in as a client.
And that's a great way to do it. It's sometimes people forget about the most common places out there, especially with their existing clients. What were the things that they had to overcome? Because when you ask people, especially your best clients, they're going to tell you. It's not like this big mystery of, oh, well, we don't know. We just saw that this while driving down the street and said, this is kind of cool. Let's go do it.
Yeah.
There had to be a specific motivation there.
Yeah. And if you find people who are actively looking to solve the problem, it will also help you to target people who don't know that they have that problem yet.
Right, exactly. Because it's amazing how many people that you have to remind them that they have a problem, because we live in this society that sometimes, because of the amount of problems that people are experiencing, they become numb to its existence. So unless you remind them, like, oh, by the way, you have a paper cut, people forget they have a paper cut.
Yeah.
I jokingly like to tell people sometimes you got to take a little lime wedge and squeeze it on it.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
And it's like,
or if they have a paper cut, maybe they don't know that there's even a possible solution out there for paper cuts, and there's your opportunity to educate them.
Right, exactly. Because until they're aware of it, it doesn't matter. You could have the best solution in the world, but they're like, oh, that's cool, and then they don't think about it. Versus, oh my gosh, you said something that reminded me, like, I have been feeling that way. Can you help with this? Because we get so busy and we just suppress things that don't really service us, so we have to do stuff to bring it back to the surface. It's just a process that we go through. So obviously it sounds like people can do a lot with their PR themselves. What's really, in terms of, let's say, finding those reporters to contact, what's one of the ways that people can do that? Because some people are thinking, well, what choices do I have? Do I just go to the local, like, of newspapers, the local news stations, or what?
There are so many places that you can go to find reporters that would be interested in covering your stories. And, you know, your options are your newspapers, your magazines, trade journals, television shows, which include your local news, your TV magazine shows, you know, the Oprahs and the Ellens, that sort of thing. There are specialty shows, and radio is huge. And of course, podcasts like you're doing. And there are free resources available to you to help you find any of those things. What I usually tell people to start with is to take a look at what they're already reading and watching or listening to, and find a reporter that covers the types of things that they want to pitch, and start there.
Right. You have to start someplace. So then, in terms of finding the right reporter to talk to, how does someone go about that? Because, you know, if you look at, let's say, some major news publications, there could be tons of reporters out there, but you're not just going to start sending an email to every last one like, hi, you don't know me, but I thought you might be interested in this. And go to the next one. Yeah, I just emailed your buddy who's sitting next to you, but I'm emailing you too.
Yeah, and actually, people doing that is one of the top pet peeves of reporters. So just don't blindly email a reporter. You want to openly and actively research them. So just to give an example, you know, we'll use you for an example. So if someone wanted to pitch you to be on your podcast, they should, first of all, listen to a couple of your past episodes and make sure it's a good fit, and find out if you've covered their topic before, and then give it a new spin. And then you would send a pitch, an email pitch, like I talked about a few minutes ago, with your story idea or your podcast idea. And then, you know, hopefully it's great and you would respond. And the process is similar no matter if it's a newspaper, magazine, or TV. So if you wanted to pitch your local nightly news, say the 5 o'clock news or whatever, you would need to, first of all, watch a few episodes of that news. So just set your DVR up and watch some episodes, and then pay attention to what reporters are covering what. So you'll have like your regular TV anchors that sit at the desk and read the news, but you'll also have correspondents. It's usually those correspondents that would come out to your event or maybe do a little tour of your candy shop or whatever it is that you're promoting. And in order to find that person's contact information, once you've said, yes, this is the reporter that I want to focus on, you go to that news station's website, find their masthead, which is their contact information, and it's usually spelled out right there for you with their phone number, their email, and usually a quick bio. There's also a really great resource that I send all of my students to. There are lots of great free resources, but this is one of the big ones. It's usnpl.com, and it's an aggregation of basically all of your regional media, newspapers, local magazines, and TV stations and radios right there. And you can just click around and play around on it until you find the right person that you're looking for.
Oh, that's great. I think it's something that people miss out on. So what do you feel about people, let's say, starting to build that rapport and relationship with the media on, let's say, a platform like Twitter?
Yeah, Twitter is actually great. Of course, you can always cold email a reporter, but just like, you or I, if someone that maybe sees something that we post on Facebook or listens to this podcast and they reach out to us and we don't know who they are, we might pay attention. But if someone who we've sort of had a little bit of back and forth with on Twitter and we recognize their name, if they send us an email and, we get, say, 300 emails a day and we see their name, we'll probably click on that one first and give it a little more attention and give a little more weight to their pitch.
And I think that's something that people forget about, is that reporters are people too. So if you focus on building the relationship first, it can easily put you at the head of the line as opposed to everyone just sending them cold pitches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an important point that you bring up, because people will kind of put reporters on this pedestal and say like, oh, I'm not good enough to talk to them, or they're not going to care about me, or they're not going to listen to me. But reporters have a job to do. And on top of that, they are so short-staffed nowadays, and the news cycle is faster than it's ever been. They're expected to report on a story and get it online, even if it's for the print version of their newspaper or magazine, they're still expected to get it online so that, they're the first to market with their news. So reporters really need people to tell them, what's out there and what they should be reporting. So I always tell everyone that I work with, everyone that come across, it's a small business owner or solo entrepreneur or an expert or a book author, you should be doing your own PR, not only for you, but as a community service.
Right.
Because it benefits everyone.
Oh, definitely. So when it comes to doing PR, what are some of those foundations that people should have in place on their website? Because they don't want to pitch them and it's like, there's nothing there. There's nothing that the reporter and the media can latch onto that really tells them who they are, what they offer, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's a few things. I mean, any publicity that you get is going to be beneficial for your brand. You'll be able to upload it to your website, share it on social media. And, if you think of it like, if you're a business owner and you place an ad in the newspaper, no one ever calls you and says, oh my God, I just saw your ad in the newspaper. But if there's a full page story about you, people will call you up and be like, oh my God, I opened the newspaper and there you were. So no matter what, you're going to be getting value. But in order to get the best return on the time that you've invested in your public relations, you want to be able to capture their information somehow.
Right.
And even if, say it's a book author, some people will say like, go to my Amazon page to buy my book. But that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, because even if people go to the webpage, if they don't buy your book immediately, they're never going to remember what the name of the book was or what your name was. But if you send them to a landing page with some sort of opt-in and you collect their email, and then maybe on the thank you page you send them to your Amazon store to buy your book, not only will they possibly buy your book, but you'll have an opportunity to engage them with email marketing or a newsletter or some other outreach to nurture that relationship and then hopefully make them a customer later on or make them a repeat customer.
Right, naturally, those are things you should have. But what if, like, just in terms of like the media specifically, should you have like let's say like a one sheet that explains who you are, so when they go to like, oh, okay, these are the topics you can talk about and so forth, or something that helps position you as an expert specifically for the media?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're asking. So press kit.
Yes, that's the word.
Yes.
It's a Monday after all. Like, what was that one word that starts with a P?
Yeah. So in your press kit, you want to have your bio, and there are really 4 different types of bios that you should have. You should have a quick Twitter bio. You should have a 50 words or less bio for radio or other podcasts. You should have a 2-line bio for TV. And then you can have your longer bio, which people would use for background information. And then what I like to tell people, and actually I don't know, Byron, if you saw this when I sent you the link to my bio, is I have a list of 10 interesting things about me.
Oh, excellent.
And I tell people to do that because, especially in a long format interview, if they're doing talk radio or if someone's putting together a long feature story about them, there are other things that are probably really interesting about you that no one would ever know unless you specifically told them.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of a neat thing to do because you want that engagement factor because it adds that personability to it. So someone goes, oh, I like this person for whatever reason. Otherwise, it's kind of like you're this cold, stoic individual they're going to talk to. Like, hi, here I am. You don't know anything about me, but I watch you every single day, and we're going to have a conversation, and that makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. And that's really, if you're just starting out, that's the basic thing that you need. And then you can always round out your press kit with, depending on your company and your industry, background on your product or service, background on your company, industry background with facts, and I like to always put those in a bulleted format so it's easy to read. Q&As, frequently asked questions, and then of course a list and a link of any of your past press releases, because that shows not only that you are a legitimate brand, but also it gives sort of weight to the history of your brand and that you're the real deal and you care about where your company is going.
Right, exactly. You have to care about those things. It's what makes a difference. You want to be human in terms of your appearance to people. Otherwise, you miss out on so much there. So with all of this that you talk about with adding the human ability, that personality component to things, identifying the reporters and so forth. What do you think about these different press release distribution services that you see out there? Are they a good idea for people to use, or should they just be communicating with the media directly?
There are pros and cons to both sides of that. So you have your big press release distribution, which is PR Newswire, Business Wire, and those are pricey. You're looking at least $1,000. There are also lower cost press release distribution outlets, and there are free ones. So depending on the news and, of course, your budget, the best is, you're going to get the best return on investment if you go with one of the more expensive ones. There's reporting that you get. You can see who clicked on your press release. Their lists are the most up-to-date because reporters are always changing. You can segment according to region or trade or really anything that you want. With the smaller ones, you're getting everything on a smaller scale. And something that's important to watch out for with the smaller ones and with the free ones is that they're not spammy and they're not going to hurt your SEO. So a lot of times when you see people, they have all these press logos on their website, as seen on NBC News and blah, blah, blah. And if you click through to actually find out the stories, it's not that, say, NBC News has had them on a show. It's that NBC News just pulled in one of the press releases from one of these distribution wires.
Right.
And something that's new with Google in their last algorithm is that repeat content can hurt the SEO for your website. And you would obviously want to upload your press release to your website or link to it in some way in your press kit, so that when reporters come looking for you, that they have that history of news that you've created. But some of these free distribution sites, they will actually take your link juice.
Right.
And it ends up hurting your own SEO for your own brand. And the free ones don't have the distribution or the name recognition that the other, PR Newswire or Business Wire get, and reporters may not put as much weight. So
that's important to know.
Yeah. So there's a fine line. And last year I had actually done a pretty in-depth review of the free press release distribution websites and figured out which ones were stealing the link juice, which ones were no follow, which ones reporters kind of respected, which ones they didn't. And of course, now that's old information. I should probably do that again for this year. But there were a few that sort of rose above, and I can't tell you which ones they were off the top of my head. But I'm probably due to go and revisit that again for this year, for 2017.
And that's great information to know, because some people, they'll see a person talking about, oh, you can use these services, and not realizing the true impact. But it really does sound like the best way to leverage them is to put out quality information.
Mm-hmm.
And then that can lead to actual stories, and then having that type of media representation on your website, so people can see that, oh, it's not just here's this little short crappy press release you sent out there that's on some local NBC affiliate in the middle of nowhere. So you're claiming that you want it to be real, substantial media appearances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's really important that people do that, because it's all about your brand. You wouldn't want to discount it, but people do that every single day of the week.
Yeah, and you don't want to be unethical.
Right. Exactly.
Which is important if you're really serious about building your brand and building a loyal customer base.
Right, because I've seen too many people out there. They'll offer those services. Oh, we'll get you into these different media outlets, and the only thing they're doing is get something super simple, like these just those basic press releases. Mm-hmm. So now it's like, oh, well, now you've actually been featured on the major media outlets. Well, no, it's this little small press release in the middle of nowhere that doesn't really, it matters to people that are living there, but it's really misrepresenting your brand.
Yeah. Although if a reporter is actually covering you or quoting you in a story or an article, that's legitimate, no matter how small the media outlet is.
Right.
It's when you write a press release and you distribute it and it just gets pulled up by the press release aggregators and not mm-hmm. by an actual reporter writing about your news, then that's where you're getting into unethical territory.
Right, exactly. That's the challenge there. So as we begin wrapping things up here, what's one thing that you recommend people do to begin getting media exposure for their business?
Well, the easiest way to get media exposure is to start using HARO, which is Help a Reporter Out. And if people aren't familiar with it, it is basically a query site that reporters use when they are already writing stories and they just need some experts to quote in their stories to round them out or to help build out their stories. It's super easy to use, and I actually have a free guide that you can download on my website that goes through the 3 very simple steps of starting to use it. And I've had people start using it. They download my book, they read through it, they follow the guidelines, and within 2 weeks, they've found themselves being interviewed for a magazine or got a TV interview. So it's super, super useful and super easy to use. And it's free.
That's excellent. Oh, that's excellent.
Absolutely free.
It's a great way to just start getting that exposure that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, awesome. So now how can people learn more about you and then reach out to you for help in the world of PR?
Well, they can first of all visit my website and download my ebook, which I recommend everyone to do, and to start using Haro. But I also teach a workshop called the Publicity Workshop, which is a group coaching program that I am going to be relaunching again in June. So if anyone is interested, right now, actually the sales page isn't even up yet. It will be up in the next couple weeks. But there is a place where you can give me your email address and I'll send you more information about it when you're ready. And then, of course, I work with a very limited number of one-on-one clients for both brand development and planning and public relations every year. And for larger companies, I actually have a program. It's a 6-month program where I will go in and train your junior PR staff to do your own PR for you.
Oh, that's excellent, because all those things matter, because every size company, whether they're a solopreneur all the way to your large Fortune 500 companies, they all have different needs to be able to leverage the media.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Melanie, for coming on to the Big Movement Podcast today and sharing your wealth of wisdom on PR and media.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Big Movement Podcast today. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Now that you've surely been inspired to take your entrepreneurial career and business to the next level, you can stop by the website and get more. And if you're ready to boost your business brand, be sure to grab your free report, 7 Easy Steps to Build Your Brand Today.